Hey everybody, it is late at night and I am Norman. Tonight I would like to share some advice for those of you who might be new to the hobby of watch collecting. These are things that I've learned in my own journey in this hobby, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you. So let us begin. First off, everybody is different, so bear that in mind as I share my experiences with you. They may not pertain to you, but hopefully you'll still be able to gain something out of them. My first piece of advice is take your time and get to know yourself first. When you're new to watch collecting, you really don't know who you are as a watch collector just yet. You're brand new to it. So take your time. You don't have to rush into having a grail watch or anything like that. If you're after just a single watch, you want one watch and that is your entire collection, you wear it every single day, the strategy that I would recommend there is research. Research. Go into an 80 or a shop and put that watch on your wrist. Maybe do that a few times. See what it's like, see how it feels, see how it looks to you, because that is the one watch that you'll be wearing. However, if you're a hunter or a collector like I am, my advice is just to explore what's out there. Early on in watch collecting, at least in my experience, I found that there are certain watches that you could purchase that just by owning them will completely alter your perspective of your collection. When I bought my first dress watch, I fell in love, and that's pretty much what I wanted to wear, was dress watches. And also when I purchased the Nomos Orion with its smaller case size and really elegant, thin design, all my other watches started looking bulky. Which reminds me, if you're gonna go little with your watches, be careful. You may not come back. I found that when I started buying smaller watches, all my other watches looked huge. And I actually like smaller watches, but as a consequence, a huge chunk of my collection is vintage watches because contemporary watches just kind of look big and clunky to me. So beware of that. Also, don't rush into choosing a grail or some high-end watch to go after. Early on in my watch collecting, I encountered the Pelagos, and I absolutely loved it, and that was my grail watch, was a Tudor Pelagos. However, shortly after encountering that watch, that was when I fell in love with dress watches. So if I had actually gone for a Tudor Pelagos, I would have a really expensive watch that just kind of sits in my watch box. So as you get to know yourself, you'll know what kind of watches you will actually wear. So take your time and see what's out there, see what you truly love. And in time, you'll get better and better at finding pieces that you just absolutely love. Right now, when I look at my watch box, a lot of times I just can't choose because they're all so amazing. Also, don't stress out about water resistance. Back in the day, I had a dive watch that had 200 meters of water resistance, and that just wasn't enough for me. Am I a diver? No. I barely even go snorkeling. 200 meters is plenty of water resistance. You don't need a watch that has 1,000 meters of water resistance unless you're super hardcore. Just remember that if you go on eBay right now, there are World War II watches that still work. Those watches were put through hell. They were nowhere near as water resistant as contemporary watches, and they still work. And those were in trenches and water and rain and all kinds of stuff. For the longest time, I thought that $1,000 was the ideal return on investment with watches. And since then, I've changed my mind. Try not to get terribly hung up on prices. You can find quality at pretty much any price point. In fact, my Henry London retails for about $80. I got it for half that on eBay UK, and that watch is absolutely amazing. Not to mention, some of my best vintage watches I got for $100 to $200. And there's the Hamilton Khaki Field, the CWC G10, the Smith's Everest. These are all brilliant watches, and they fall in well below the $1,000 price point. On that note, if you're intrigued by fashion watches, ultimately wear what you want and what you like, But the sad thing about fashion watches is a lot of them are way too expensive for what they are. And if you do a little bit of research, you'll realize that there are some watches out there at around that same price point that are so much better, by brands that are reputable, brands that aren't just in it to create a fashion piece. Although there are some fashion watch brands that aren't too bad, like Fossil and whatnot, but again, just do a little bit of research if those are the style of watches that you're after. It's sad seeing people pay a lot of money for pretty much garbage. Also remember that watch collecting is about love of watches, not about obtaining more and more expensive, higher-end pieces by big brands and whatnot. Just hunt for what you enjoy. And in my personal opinion, I don't mind homage watches. I think that if you love an aesthetic, but not necessarily enough to go through all of the saving and waiting, getting on wait lists and whatnot to get that watch, and it's not really your grail watch, I feel like homages are a decent option for you. I love the Explorer, but not enough to actually buy one and spend that much money on one, but I love the aesthetic. So I went with the Smith's Everest, and it's absolutely brilliant. But the Explorer wasn't what I was after, it was the aesthetic that I like so much. Not specifically that watch. So it's not like I settled. I got what I was after because I don't wear this terribly often. It's a watch that I wear when the mood suits me. And I just love the Explorer aesthetic. If my goal watch was an Explorer, that watch wouldn't cut it though. And avoid fakes. If you are tempted by such things, do some research in the dark, seedy marketplace that those spawn. If you collect mechanical watches, don't be afraid of quartz. I know it's a big no-no when you're first starting out, but there actually are some brilliant quartz watches out there. And if they aren't central to your collection, if they're watches that you wear just every now and then, they're very handy. You can just pick them up off your shelf and they're all ready to go. And you don't have to have them serviced. I mean, you have to change their batteries, but that's nothing like servicing them. Also, I would recommend finding a watchmaker that you trust. If you collect quartz watches, find that battery guy at the mall that does a really good job. I had a guy just like that at the mall down the street from here. All my watches I took to him to have the batteries replaced. And for mechanical watches, find out who other people use. So for me, I heard the time teller recommending TikTok watch repairs in the USA, and so I gave them a try, and they've been absolutely amazing. They cleaned out a smudge on the inside of the Everest. They swapped out the crystal on my vintage Movado, so now it has a sapphire crystal. They serviced my pull router, and they did an amazing job. That watch is just working brilliantly. And also, if you're collecting mechanical watches, I would recommend viewing some watchmaker videos on YouTube so you can see what goes into repairing watches. I think it'll give you peace of mind because you'll realize that most problems with mechanical watches can be solved. Yes, it might be expensive if custom parts have to be built, but these watches are designed to be serviced, so your watch probably can be fixed. And you'll realize just how easy it is to replace crystals. Speaking of crystals, Polywatch is a game changer. I used to avoid acrylic crystals like the plague until I encountered Polywatch and realized that little scratches can be buffed out of there super easy. And if they can't, again, crystals can be replaced. Replacing the crystal on this was around $100, and that was for a sapphire. And they also changed the battery and gave me a warranty on that. Plus, if you know a little bit about how mechanical watches work, you'll know how to better protect your watch. I also recommend getting a demagnetizer. They're dirt cheap, and if one of your watches does happen to become magnetized, they're a lifesaver. Get yourself a good spring bar tool. You will be using it often. In fact, I recommend having a big pile of straps for your watches. Usually, when I buy a watch, at the same time, I'll buy a strap for it. Also, buy lots of buckles, because like I've discussed in a previous video, you can actually do micro adjustments on your watch straps just by swapping out the buckle. If you have watches with date windows on them, don't change the date when the time is near midnight. You don't want to damage those gears at a point in time where they might be engaged. Also, get yourself a watch roll for traveling. Those are a lifesaver. Also, try not to let other people's negative opinions alter your opinions about your own watches. It's easier said than done. It's happened to me a couple times, and it's almost like a poisonous seed is planted in your mind. And it just kind of stews there and kind of bugs you, and after a while, it actually can alter your opinion of any given watch. And yeah, watches that I loved, it just took one negative comment about, and after a while I found myself not loving them so much anymore. So as best you can, avoid letting that get to you. Everyone has different opinions. Also realize that when the time does come to sell off a watch or two because your collection is so big, just know that you are going to lose money. Watches really are not an investment. Even with profitable watches like Rolex, you're not going to get them at retail cost. You're going to be getting them at the cost that they would sell for, so you probably break even. If you sit on it long enough, you might make some money, but watches are not an investment. Unless you're buying garbage watches and restoring them and then selling them, you might make some pocket change. They just really, pretty much every watch that I've sold has been at a loss. So just bear that in mind when you go to thin out your collection. Hopefully these pointers are helpful to you, and thanks for watching.